why did we, you know, why are we doing this? Well, I explained earlier that we're making these Booleans because that's going to control when the code that gets called that makes the panel move to the right or slide to the right. Okay. And that's what we're about to code now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our update function. And as it says here, the update is called once per frame. It's an average around 60 frames a second. It really depends on your machine and your hardware and everything that's going on. But good rule of thumb is around 60 times a second, give or take. So just for from here on out, if I say 60 times a second, that's what I'm referring to, this update. So about 60 times a second, this code is going to get called. So we're going to start using a thing called if statements, right? So what we want to do is if move menu panel equals true. So let's do that. Move if the move menu panel equals true. Now there's two different ways you can do it. If this is true, so for beginner programmers, usually you would say if this equals true, you can do that. This means, and we'll do open and close bracket. What this means is if the menu panel equals true, then call whatever code I write here, right? But if this is false, it's going to skip anything that's in the bracket here. Okay. Another way to write it is just this. If menu panel. If menu panel, this is saying the same thing. If menu panel is true. So you can do either one of those. I like to do it like this. This is the way I'm going to do it. So the if menu panel is true, we're going to call code. And the code we're going to write is the code to move it over. So I'm going to write that for now. Okay. And so yeah, I'm going to write it just like this. So the next thing we want to do, so now in the update function, and let's go ahead and write one below it. So I'm going to skip, and we're going to do another one for if move menu panel back, right? So if move menu panel back, we're going to call some code that we're going to write that will control it moving back. Okay. Next thing we want to do is we want to say, okay, so if move menu panel is true, then how do we move it forward? Well, the first thing we do is we're going to call that game object that we had, right? So in this case, this is our menu panel. So we're going to say menu panel dot transform dot position. So we're going to try to find the position of the menu panel, and we're going to equal it. Now here's something brand new for you guys. We're going to use something called a Lerp function. If you look down in the description of the video below, I'll have a link to Lerp, so you can read more about it in the Unity documentation. But Lerp is this function that Unity gives us to help us move things over time across a screen. And what it does is it takes one position, we'll call position A. So you might have an object, a game object that is in position A, and you want to move it to position B, whatever position that is. But if you set it equal to that position, it's just going to snap to that position. As we saw earlier at the beginning of our program, when we snap our menu panel to its original position. But we don't want to do that. We want it to move over time, or we want it to interpolate over time. If you don't know what interpolate means, just Google it, go look at interpolation. But it's used a lot in apps and game design. So we're going to interpolate between these two positions. And what it does is it will take your game object and move it every frame closer and closer to your position B, whatever position that is. But what it does, the math that it does, is it just moves it closer and closer without ever getting to that position. So it's doing this math where it moves it, and it just keeps moving it, and it will infinitely move it forever without actually getting there. And if you read up on it, you'll see what I mean. So we're going to write code in a way that it will move it to there, and once it gets to a certain position, we're going to set it equal to position B, right? Because if we don't, it's going to keep calculating that math. And in the background, the app's going to keep doing that. And it's just going to be taking up resources for your processor that it doesn't really need to be doing. And we're going to account for that. And the code that we write here will do it. A lot of developers may not account for that. They may not see a loss in performance, but a good rule of thumb is to only do calculations when they need to be done. Don't ever be doing them in the background because it can slow down apps over time and have memory leaks and things like that. So we're going to account for that. So again, the new function is a Lerp. So what we're going to do in a Lerp, we're using a vector 3. You can use vector 2 sometimes since we're on 2D plane, but I still like to do vector 3. So we're going to do vector 3 dot Lerp. And a Lerp function, look here, when you start doing the open and close parentheses, when you do the open parentheses here, it's going to give you a suggestion of what you may want. So this vector 3 Lerp is going to take in a vector 3 position A, whatever position that is, okay, which is usually going to be the position of the game object that we're trying to move. And then we're going to put the vector B, which is going to be the position we want to go to. And then we're going to give it a float T, which in this case will be the movement speed. And we're going to give it a movement speed, and we're going to multiply it times time delta. It's the way I like to do it, and I'll explain why I like to do it that way. So let's go ahead and write the code, and then I'll explain what we're doing. First thing we do, you see this thing needs a float, but we haven't declared a float. So the first thing we want to do, let's go up here, and let's go ahead and declare a public float. Float is just another type of number, a decimal number. We're going to do public float, and we're going to call this, we can call it move speed because this directly correlates to the movement speed of the object. So move speed, and we're going to do that. And then we can set this number back in our inspector, and I'll show you that later. So make sure you have a public float move speed. Okay. Come back down to the Lerp, and again, just to see what we need a vector 3A, vector 3B, and a float. So for this position, so we're going to feed it. The vector 3A is going to be the menu panel dot transform dot position. And then the next one is going to be, so when we call move menu panel, we're moving it to the menu panel, the active position, right? So we're going to give it menu panel. Where are we at? We're going to give it the menu active position. So we're going to call it menu active position dot transform dot position. Okay. And then we're going to feed it the move speed. And what I like to do, different people do different things. I like to multiply the move speed times time dot delta time. Okay. And you can read about what time dot delta time is. There, I'll put a link in the description below. But by doing this, this will help it kind of slide and kind of slow down the more that it gets to its position. If you don't put in the time, if you don't multiply move speed, if you don't multiply move speed times delta time, it will just move really fast that position, which could be good if that's what you want. You can play with it. You can do it with move speed, and you can do it with move speed and multiplying it by the delta time, and you'll see the difference for yourself. But so let's kind of talk through what's happening here. When I click that button and it gives move menu panel, it's going to, remember this update function is getting called around 60 times a second. So it's looping through this. As long as this move menu panel is just going to be true, it's going to calculate. It's going to take, it's going to do the Lerp function. It's going to take the current position of your menu panel, and it's going to try and move it to that active position. So every time it hits it, so this menu panel position gets changed. It's every time it goes to the update function, this is going to have a different value. This position here is going to have a different value every time. Okay. But this value will stay the same. Okay. So we got that. And the next thing we want to do, we're going to go down. We're going to create another if statement. And we are going to check if our menu panel has gotten to a certain position. Because if it's at a certain position, then we want to stop calculating this Lerp, right? We don't need to calculate it if it's where we think it should be. And that's what we're going to account for now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to declare a, I think it's a float. Let me look here. So we're going to declare another float up here. Okay. We're going to call this, we can do a public variable. It can be private if you want, either way. Public, a float. And we're going to call this we're going to make this, we're going to call this a temp position, right? So we're going to call this temp menu position. Okay. And you'll see what I'm going to be doing with that in a second. So go to an if statement, open up parentheses. So if the menu panel dot transform. Now we're going to use something called local position. I'll put a link down in the description, but just know that this is a better way of keeping up its true position for the purposes of checking this part. Just know that this is a better way. Local position. If that local position, and we're only looking at the X, okay? Equals, if this equals, meaning, so I'm using a double equal sign here. If you're not familiar with double equal sign, this is when you're comparing two values to each other. If I had a variable and I just had a single equal sign, that means I'm trying to transfer the contents on the right side to the space of the left side, right? And we've done that up here. Here, I wanted to transfer this position to this position's variable. But down here with the equal, I'm comparing. That's the big difference. You're comparing it this way, and this way you're actually transferring over data. This one you're comparing data. So just remember that. So we're going to compare that to the temporary, so the temp menu position, okay? And I know this doesn't make sense yet, but you'll see where I'm going in a second. Okay. And this doesn't really like that, but that's okay for now. So don't worry about that too much now. So if temp menu position is equal to this value, then we're going to make move. We're going to create a false here. So we're going to make move menu panel. This equals false. We're going to set that to false. And we're going to take the menu panel and we're going to set its position equal to this menu active position. Okay. And then I'm going to make this temp position equal to, I don't know, I'm going to pull out a crazy number and it's going to look weird, but I'll explain my logic behind why I'm doing this. And then right after this, we're going to do another if statement. And we're going to say if move menu panel so we're saying temp menu position equals the menu panel dot transform menu panel dot transform. Why is it not doing the it's not doing my thing. Oh, equals menu panel dot transform dot position. Position. Okay. So now we just wrote this code. I know it seems. Oh, and we have to do the dot position dot x. Okay. So let me show you, let me try to explain what we're doing here. Again, we're going to check and see every time this update function gets called, we're going to check if move menu panel is true. If it is true, we're going to hit all this code. If it's not, we're not going to hit it, obviously, but we're going to hit it. And what we're going to do is we're doing this Lerp position. This line of code right here has to be called over an update function, and this will move the menu panel closer and closer to this menu active position that we've given it, right? And then we want to do some checking because we don't want this code to keep calling if our menu panel is where we want it to be. We don't need to keep calling this code. So that's what we're checking here. We're checking if the menu panel position, well, first of all, we're setting if the move menu panel, if that's true, then we're going to set this temp menu position equal to the current position. Because remember, every frame this gets moved, the current menu panel position .x. We're going to save it here. So that gets run every time. So we also check if the menu panel position, if the x value of that, we don't care about the y value or the z value because this is moving along the x axis, right? So we're going to check if it's equal to temp menu position. If it's equal, that means it hasn't moved anymore, okay? That it's at a point where this is equal to that position and it's not going to move anymore. So there's no reason to call this code. So once it's equal to that position, that means that they're equal to each other and we don't need to move anymore. So we're going to set move menu panel to false because we don't need to call this anymore. We're going to set the menu panel position. We're going to set it exactly equal to the menu active position. And then we're going to give this temp menu position a crazy value that it would never be. And this is good for when we can reuse this variable later. Don't worry if you don't understand it. This is something you learn over time of doing this. Just know that if I make this value really crazy like I did, then it can't be misconstrued later for a value that could be real. Okay. So yeah, so we're checking these values if they're close. If that menu panel local position .x is equal to our temp menu position, then we're going to set that to false, and we're going to set all these to these values, right? So and you're going to do the same thing for the move menu panel back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this because it's basically going to be the same code just with a few variables changed. We're going to paste this. And but this time we're not lerping to the menu active position, right? We're going to be lerping to the menu original position. Okay. And then if the, all these will be the same, but this now we're going to move menu panel underscore back. Set that to false. And we're going to set this, and we're going to change this to menu original position. Move menu panel back. Okay. So that's our main changes. It's basically the same as before, except like I said, we're going to be lerping to our original position, not to the active position. Okay. So yeah, that controls the movement, and I think that should work. So let's see if it works. I don't know. Maybe it won't. I don't know. Let's file, save all. Let's go over here, make sure it's compiling. Reference script in this behavior is missing. Let's double click that and see. Let's clear that. Let's see. Oh, it's because we're still playing. Okay. So it compiled. Let's hit play again. And let's see if our code actually works. Let's hit the hamburger button. It didn't go. So let's look. I think we need to. Okay, that makes sense. So if you look on the canvas, if you look down the menu panel, so I clicked on canvas over here. I'm over here now. We didn't set our our move speed. Okay. This temp menu position value, it doesn't really need to be public, but I just wanted to put it here so you could see the values changing. But our move speed, we need to change it. So let's, I don't know, let's put in, I don't know, let's put in 2. I don't know. Let's see what that looks like. So if we hit play and we hit our hamburger button, it moves over very slow. If we hit the arrow button back, it goes over. So let's give it a, let's give it a faster, let's give it a faster one. Let's stop that. Let's give it a faster one. Let's do, I don't know, 10. Maybe that's better. Yep. It goes back. Now it's a little jumpy, and that's kind of alarming. Why is it so jumpy? It's kind of strange that it's so jumpy, right? And a lot of this, it might be that I'm sharing a screen, so it's jumping because I'm sharing screens. But if we made a build, it probably would work better. So yeah. So yeah, a part of that could be that I'm running both this. I'm kind of doing a lot of things on my computer. I'm recording and I'm building this. But what we'll do is we can always build this out to make sure that it works like it should on device. So I think that's where I'm going to stop the video for today with that code and what we did. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll build this out to my phone or to an iPad and see if it works. And if it works like it's supposed to on the iPad, because a lot of times these things will work differently. And then if it does, I'll just go ahead and do a tutorial about how to build to your iPad, and then we'll come back and finish putting a little bit more functionality into the app. Okay, guys. So yeah, that's it for today, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you guys in the next one. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.